Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name's Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the co-host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I am with Dr. Joanna Richey. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I am doing great. How was your weekend in Denver?
Oh, it was so much fun. It's always great to connect with the fellow American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgeons and go through case review, which was an amazing experience, and just, really, really good work for the profession. So,
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, we've got a phenomenal guest today, Joe. I'd like to welcome Dr. Matthew Word to Dean's Chat. Welcome, Dr. Word.
Great, thank you. I'm privileged and honored.
Well, this has been in the works for quite a while because your daughter Maddie was on with the Barry University Dean's Chat.
So, you're getting old when your kids kind of outshine you, and she's already starting to outshine me. But yes, she still talks about how much fun she had on your podcast. So thanks for inviting her lower person in the family in podiatry.
And she's going to be a star in the profession for sure. Dr. Word, we're fairly informal on Dean's Chat. Is it okay with you if we go first names, Matt, Joe, and Jeff?
Perfect.
All right. Well, let me give you a little more formal introduction. Dr. Word is in private practice in Lakeland, Florida. He's board certified by the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery. He went to the Scholl College of Podiatric Medicine and followed that up with residency in Miami, Florida, with the late Dr. Keith Kashik. I look forward to talking about that. You are the past president of the American Academy of Podiatric Sports Medicine, and in 2024, you became a Lifetime Achievement Award winner. Congratulations. You are also a long-distance athlete, whether it's Ironman triathlons or ultra-distant biking or marathon running. We'll get into that a little bit. And then you are about to release the third edition as the editor of the Athletic Footwear, Orthoses, and Sports Medicine book. As you mentioned earlier, one edition's great. Two's even better. Three means you got something going.
Yes, it's been starting as a small project. Just a little background: we've been presenting at the American College of Sports Medicine, a few podiatrists, which for those interested, really it's our umbrella organization for all sports medicine. PhDs, athletic trainers, team physicians, physical therapists, and I've really enjoyed over the years going to these meetings because there's not a lot of podiatrists, and we see different views and angles, and we've presented different workshops and exams, and we've presented things on shoes over the years, and we always got questions, and at some point we had an editor came up to us after one of the meetings and asked us to see if we wanted to put it in writing, and that's kind of how that got started. And our second edition, we went from 300 to almost 500 pages with 35 plus contributors, majority of which are past presidents of AAPSM or fellows, and it's really been a nice endeavor that I got as a result of doing something a little bit outside the box. So.
Wow, I can't even imagine trying to corral 35 contributors to a book. What was that like?
So that was much more of a challenge than actually writing things in the book, because everyone has deadlines and not everyone goes by the same deadlines. But I guess you kind of know what you're getting when you have people all over the country trying to contribute, and it's really it's come a long way, but it's been an enjoyable task. So it's really it's been a long process, but I think the product and the finished product is something that a lot of people have gotten some good insights and usage out of.
Kudos to you. That's a monumental effort for sure. Joe?
Yeah, so I would love to pick your brain a little bit about your experience in this collaborative space. So certainly with the American College of Sports Medicine, as you identified, there are lots of different practitioners and different physician types. You're also an AO fellow, so you had the opportunity to go to both Davos, Switzerland, as well as Germany. So you've had experiences working collaboratively in the orthopedic world. What is that? Why do you think that being collaborative and representation for podiatry, like, what is it for you that makes that really important? Because your CV is extensive in these interdisciplinary opportunities.
Yeah, great question. So one of the probably the most enjoyable thing at these multi-specialty collaborative efforts, such as ASM, ACSM, for example, they have a session on case studies, and they usually have someone's fellow presents a case. And in the room is not all podiatrists; it's very few, usually one or two. Jeff Ross, Tim Dutra, Karen Langone come to mind. We've all become fellows within ACSM, which is a nice thing to shoot for if anyone's interested in expanding their sports medicine interest. But so someone presents a case, and we kind of know how we would treat that. But you've got an athletic trainer in the room, you got a physical therapist, you have a researcher, you have a team physician, you have an orthopedist, and everyone kind of chimes in on, I do this, I would do that. We each have our own protocols, and it kind of opens your eyes to a different way to approach what may be a common problem that we tend to treat, or a common presentation that turns out to be an uncommon diagnosis. And I think one of the keys with sports medicine is making an accurate and early diagnosis. The old analogy is, if you see hoof prints on the ground, what's the first thing we think of is a horse. But as an acute sports medicine physician, or physician for that matter, it's identifying the zebras that come up, and try to make the best, most accurate diagnosis in order to formulate a treatment plan. So in the AO fellowship I did, I'd like to call out one of your previous guests, and I know a friend of yours, Dr. Hanft, Jason Hanft, where I did my residency under Dr. Kashik. Dr. Hanft was one of my attendings, and I do believe that he started that with our residency program, that collaboration, and it continued through. My chief resident was a gentleman named Adam Landsman, who has done quite a bit in our profession, and I really was fortunate to have such a great experience in my residency. And Adam had done a AO fellowship, and at the time, in order to do it, it was competitive. It still is competitive, but there were no podiatry AO meetings, as you may or may not be aware. But so I had to, one of my qualifications was to do the AO basic residence course for orthopedics, the orthopedic basic residence course, which I did in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it was everything, not just foot and ankle. So we were doing shoulder and knee, and there's a little bit of foot and ankle mixed in, but that at the time gave me the opportunity to apply for the fellowship. And my fellowship was actually in just outside of Freiburg, Germany. And for 1 week, all the European AO fellowships, or all the fellows that were in Europe, met in Davos, which is, for those of you that may or may not know, the kind of the ground zero. That's where all the fixation started. The Swiss are ingenious. The 4 original founders placed a little clinic at the base of one of the nicest ski resorts anywhere in the world, and people would ski down, they'd break their ankle, and they'd wheel them into the clinic, and they'd figure out what kind of plates or screws. And remember, this is back in the 50s and 60s. And fortunately, my week in Davos, one of the original 4 was doing some lectures, and Professor Matter was kind of neat to meet one of the original 4. And they took us, we went on one of the factories where they fabricated all the internal fixation, and like a Swiss watch, the Swiss making of internal fixation is pretty impressive. So that was really it was an incredible experience, to say the least.
Oh man, that's so neat. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, then you brought that back to Miami, and you had an opportunity to train under really a icon in our profession, Dr. Keith Kashik. Do you mind commenting on your residency experience?
Yeah, so grew up in Chicago, went to undergrad in the Midwest, Big Ten, kudos to you being a Midwesterner. No pun intended. I hear you're from Milwaukee, but and I always thought I was going to do some type of intern, mostly around Chicago, and figured I would be back there at some point. And went to the DC Crypt, never having visited. At the time, it was Health South Larkin Hospital, and it was one more room I had to go into and meet with people, and immediately just hit it off with Adam and Dr. Kashik, and just super impressive with not only sports medicine, which was great, but just really a true gentleman and extremely well trained. And we made the connection, and I ended up spending 2 incredible years in Miami with Dr. Kashik. So, I got as most of us, a bunch of stories, but very academic, meticulous, super well trained, very demanding. There were stories I had heard when I'd ask about the program, and he can get not necessarily upset, but if you don't do what you're doing, he's demanding and he wants you to do it. But I learned pretty quickly that if you study the cases coming up and you know what you're doing, you get there on time, you have everything ready. Couldn't have been more of a excellent teacher, and that's certainly one of the skills I got out of him. But it was about two months, month and a half, 2 months into my residency. We had just finished the day's cases, and he said, "Hey, Matt, I've got to do a house call if you want to come with me." I'm like, "Well, house calls, I'm a resident. I didn't know we do house calls anymore, but glad to do one." And hopped in his car, and we drove up to Davie, Florida. And we get there, and he didn't really say too much about what we're doing. And I'm looking around, and it was the Miami Dolphins training camp. And we get to the security, and security's like, "Oh, Dr. Kashik, we've been waiting for you." And we get in, and he goes, "Oh, come on in." And they go up to the second floor, and he had a little bag with him with some injectables and things. And sure enough, we get out of the elevator, and this picture window, this huge office looking out at the practice fields, was Don Shula, the coach of the Miami Dolphins. And for probably 15 minutes, they were chatting about golf and fishing. And at the end of it, we actually treated him, which was kind of a neat experience. But
Wow.
things like that were common. We had a month or two after that, in the surgeon's lounge between a couple of cases, they said, "Dr. Kashik, we got a patient." At the time, some of you may not remember, but MRIs used to be on like films, where you'd put the films up versus being digital now. But we came to the surgeon's lounge, put the the MRI films up, and in walks this gentleman who was very intense at the time. Played quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, who had an Achilles tendon rupture. It was having issues because it had been repaired previously, and he was basically was dorsiflexing a little much, so he was getting some jamming. And anyway, he comes in, and they chatted a little bit, and ended up making an AFO brace at the time in the mid 90s with the stop on it to basically prevent a little bit of dorsiflexion. He wore that for the last couple of years. If you watch any of his Dolphins things, he wore that for the rest of his training, the rest of his career.
Wow. Incredible. Matt, I'm having this snapshot image of Dr. Kashik and Dr. Landsman and Dr. Hanft and you. Well, what an outstanding environment.
One more you can add in is Dr. Lucido.
And Dr. Lucido, of course. Yes, Jim. Oh my gosh. So it's no wonder that your CV looks like it does, with all the research and the lectures and the books and the chapters, and you were trained well.
That's what, that's where it all starts. And you know what, you get out of it what you put into it, and that's just a life lesson. As whatever you do, you're shooting, the more you shoot, the better you get, and the more you put into it, the more satisfying it is. And I've always been brought up to put everything into whatever you do, whether it's whatever it is. The more you put into something, the more rewards you get out of it. And I've been fortunate to be around people that have really helped pave the way on some of that.
Wow, Joe, there's like a common theme of so many of our guests that are leaders in the profession.
Yeah, even Matt, when you were talking about just general advice, right? Like I learned very quickly, I think you said to show up early, come prepared, and get the room ready. Like three very simple things, but they're the exact same things we still to this day tell our students. These are the ways that you show up and you excel. It's great if you get things right when people ask you, like that's even better, right? But if you can just do those three things, it will set, it's crazy that that's sometimes as simple as it is, but sage advice across the
No,
spectrum of years.
no doubt. And, you learn that pretty quickly. And I think the people that have problems with things are people that don't address being timely and prepared. And, those go for obviously residency, but anything in life that you do, the better prepared you are, the less likely you're gonna have issues that may come up.
Matt, I was going to wait till later, but I think maybe now's a good time to bring it up. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And Joe and I had such an enjoyable discussion with your daughter, Maddie. She's a student at Barry University School of Podiatric Medicine. What was it like for her growing up podiatry? How'd she land in podiatry? Because that's just wonderful.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so myself, obviously, I've been a little bit athletic over the years, and that has carried on to Maddie's my oldest. And growing up, I was fortunate in this profession to be able to coach her as well as my other two children. And I am in a private practice, so if I need to be at a practice or a game, I can work that in. But I was at every game, every practice, never missed any big events. And Maddie was always interested, I think, in some kind of medicine. She actually, in her junior year in high school, she played soccer, cross country, track, and she had a bad ankle sprain in one of her soccer games. It was kind of a grade 2, grade 3 anterior talofibular ATF tear. And we rehabbed her like we would any other athlete aggressively, to the point where within a couple of weeks we got her back. And anyway, she obviously went through an injury experience, but also when she had time off, coming in the office, helping, and by the second, third, fourth year in the office, my staff really enjoyed when she came, because she would actually do things that kind of got them off the hook from doing things. So they look forward to having her. But she never really committed to doing podiatry. She went to Florida State University undergrad, and interesting, Florida State, one of the few undergrad colleges in the United States that has a undergrad degree through their medical school. So her degree was through the FSU Medical School, which meant every semester she had to take a half a credit in some kind of medical related class. She got her CMA and was planning. She had a 3.99 something GPA and was head of the medical school route, and I never pushed her, never really said anything about it. It's one of those things, the harder you push, the harder they push back sometimes. So sometimes you got to let them figure it out on their own. And sure enough, her senior year, second semester, she had been planning on maybe taking a gap year, which most people do in the medical school route. But just started asking me about, applying in schools and so forth. And the rest is history. We went down Barry. She had an interview, and like I said, she couldn't be more happier, and I couldn't be happier either. And certainly, you hear some negative things about the profession, but I would encourage anyone that's interested in this profession to do some shadowing and get involved, because it really is. It's a great profession, a great lifestyle. You can do things that you may not if you're on call all night in some other medical professions that you don't have that opportunity. So we're looking forward. She's at a spot now where, if I compare where she is at the end of her third year to where I was at the end of my third year, she's light years ahead of me, and she's going to do great things. I'm looking forward to seeing her, including they offer a dual MBA degree. So she's taking MBA classes and will graduate with her MBA with her podiatry degree as well. So
My
So
gosh,
that,
that's fabulous. You must be so proud of her, and justifiably so. Joe, it's interesting, Dr. Steinberg's son's going to be going into podiatry. David Armstrong's daughter just graduated from our school. So often, I mean, what parent is going to steer their child in a direction other than towards success, right?
Yeah, and who gets to really, peek behind the curtain and see how the sausage is made sometimes too, that you live that story that, one of the things that sometimes we'll talk with prospective students about is, sometimes it's easy to look at like the things of something you're like, oh, I love all this positive. I want to do all that positive stuff. And you forget to sometimes ask, what does the worst day in your profession look like? And am I the kind of person that could tolerate that? Can I emotionally get through that? So I think it's that point of, you know, there are lots of different ways to practice medicine, and there's lots of different ways to be involved. And I think it's really important when you're trying to figure out, what do I want and what kind of life do I want to live and how do I build a life to support these goals? Asking sometimes, like, what is the downside of what you do when people shadow? I start to volunteer that sometimes when, do you have any questions for me? And sometimes the answer is no. And it's like, well, let me tell you, after you just saw all this amazing stuff, let me just tell you about the parts that are hard, because sometimes it's important to know what is hard, and maybe this works and resonates with you and you're like, yeah, I could do those hard things. And maybe it's like, you know what, that's not for me, and that's okay. But I think being transparent about the profession is important. And to your point, Matt, there's a lot of negativity, but not a lot of it's actually really accurate when you start to like piece it apart. So we do really want to be transparent, and I think the fact that there are so many generational, or I think you call them legacy, Jeff, legacy students coming through is such a testament too, that they kind of know what they're getting into. And I think that that's really beautiful.
I still do, not as much, but I still do some lecturing here and there. And one slide I started putting up a few years ago was a slide of Maddie at one of the APMSA meetings with her colleagues, and Dr. Christina was in the background. It was an APMA thing. And anyway, it's a room full of podiatry students, and I asked what's the commonality between all these people, and every one of them has a huge smile on their face. They're all smiling, and they seem to be happy, and they enjoy where they are. And uh, that's been my experience with the young people and young people in the profession, which I think that bodes well for the future. And so Maddie went through 4 years undergrad, and even in a medical school program, one time she heard about podiatry, which is a little frustrating. That's one of the challenges that I think she probably talked a little bit about. But her going through it firsthand and knowing that what her dad did, and the fact she never really was exposed to it, and if someone missed that day where they mentioned podiatry, they probably would never even know about it. So, and commend this podcast is one small thing that may contribute. If someone comes across it and says, what's it about? This is exposure that I think we need significantly. And I know Pat DeHare, which I know well. I think he's kind of focusing on trying to market this profession just to get the word out, so to speak.
It's interesting. We need to figure out that gap, right? Because students had a smile on their face. When our students went and shadowed podiatrists, they said the podiatrists were the happiest docs that they shadowed, yet you could go through 4 years of undergrad and hear about podiatry once. There's a gap there that we need to close.
Yeah, so in a couple, actually, and I saw Pat in Phoenix at the meeting a couple weeks ago, and he's got 3 groups he's focusing on: the biochem group, the MCAT takers that may not have known about it, and then the third group is college athletes, which interests me because I was a college athlete, and that's one thing that kind of got me turned on to podiatry, because I knew a lot of the injuries were foot and ankle related. And I'm like, well, put 2 and 2 together, this makes a lot of sense. But the athletes that have any interest in medicine may not be exposed to it. So I think that's a great avenue, and I don't know how to get that done exactly, but I like the idea of focusing on exposing college athletes. With my son's a college athlete as well, and I'd like to see a little bit more of that down that avenue as well.
think it's one of those all hands on deck things. So what was harder, Matt? Was it harder to be a D1 athlete wrestling, or was it harder to become a ultra distance athlete down the road?
Or I
Oh,
think there were like 7 Ironmans. We need to, I mean, that's an impressive thing. One is impressive, but 7, sorry, I had to
yeah.
throw that one in there.
So yeah, college being a student athlete is extremely difficult. So, and there's a reason the student is before athlete, because you're a student first for the most part, although with the NIL stuff that's changed. But um, I think that was probably more challenging than doing some of these other things. My son is now in his 4th year. He played 4 years of Division I football, and this spring was his first spring in his 4 years that he hasn't had 6 days a week, 4 hours a day of practice or what have you. And I've talked to him about it. He said, "Well, he didn't know what to do with his free time." He's like, "I've got all this time now," and I think in the business world, people are hiring. They look for college or athletes that have learned to manage their time well. And I think there's so many life lessons in sports. But so I've done. So my track on doing Ironman is kind of interesting. I used to run all the time in the late 90s. I was doing 60, 70 miles a week running. I did Boston in I think it's 2000 or so. And about 6 weeks before, I was doing some hill work, which not a lot of hills in Florida, but still trying to do some things. And I had a bad IT band injury to the point where I couldn't go run past 8 miles. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I've got to do something. So I started getting in the pool at someone's suggestion. And then I started to bike a little bit. Finished the Boston Marathon, but then about a month after, I did my first triathlon, and probably 200 not Ironman, but just all distance triathlons in Florida is kind of a mecca for triathlons. And I was, I like to put something out there all the time, so they have something to kind of, there's a carrot to train for, because you be a little more physical and active. And at the end of the tunnel was always a Hawaiian Ironman, which I always wanted to do. And you don't just show up and do it; you got to work your way up. And anyway, that was always in the back of my mind on my bucket list. And sure enough, I did 3 prior Ironman, and I ended up getting a qualifying spot to do Hawaii, which was a pretty epic day in itself. So.
That's so incredible. Did the training in Florida with the heat and humidity must have helped you a little bit for the Ironman in Hawaii?
Yeah, it definitely helped. But yeah, it helped to some degree, but there's nothing like Kona in the heat in Kona, because there's no shade. This is just a little side story that has some relevance to the medical profession. There's a gentleman named Bob Salas, who is a medical doctor, and he has been putting on it's an Ironman endurance medicine conference in Kona the week prior to the Hawaiian Ironman. And at the time, I was president of our academy. He was president of the American College of Sports Medicine. So we met and we saw each other at a number of the meetings. And I was always asking him about Kona, and he's telling me to come to the conference. And it was one of those things where I was getting pretty good at doing the tries, and I'm like, I don't really want to go unless I'm going to do it. And sure enough, I got in one year and I saw him. I said, yeah, I'm coming, and I'm going to actually do it. So I went to the conference, which was highly recommended for anyone that's interested in doing it. There's about 150 physicians, everything endurance medicine you ever want to know. And if you go to the conference, you actually get to work the medical tent on race day, which is kind of cool, to work the Ironman medical tent. And they have one spot that they lottery off for the next year's Ironman to get in. It's very difficult to get in, so you've got a 1 in 150 chance, if you're interested, to get in. So I had done a number before, and I had planned on finishing the race and then working the medical tent. I had my athlete band on. I had my medical event or medical tent bag or wristband on, there was, I think, 2 or 3 other physicians that also were doing the race. And so long story short, and I knew that all the medical protocols, they weigh you in prior to the swim, your body weight. And if you come in the medical tent after, you get weighed as well. So needless to say, I had a long day on the run. I did a great swim. The bike was decent. And, it's another story. But anyway, I checked in the medical tent. I know everybody in there. I'm like, I need a couple IVs. And sure enough, I got on the scale and I lost 15 pounds
Wow.
one day. And I knew on the course I could have stopped and they would have pulled me off the course. So I said, if it wasn't Hawaii, I probably would have stopped. But anyway, you're exposed, and the pavement has the temperature is probably the 90s, but it's 120 plus coming off the pavement. So just a great experience. But
I've got a question for you. It's kind of like, like battle story, if you will. But what's it like coming off the bike, putting on your running shoes? What's that transition like for the first couple miles?
Yeah, and that's what it is. And obviously, that's you train, you do bricks. In your training, you're practicing doing, 100-mile bike, and then you hop off and you run 3 or 4 miles. But those first 1, 2, 3 miles are probably the most challenging because you're in one position riding for, I think I rode like 5 and change on the bike, and switching, and your time never stops. So in transition, even that, you're trying to hurry through that, and it's not easy, that's for sure. But you get through it, and once you kind of get in a rhythm, you start going. And like I said, there's some life lessons. I actually did one kind of funny but not so funny story. So for the endurance medicine seminar, they usually have a keynote speaker. And the year I was there, the keynote speaker was the gentleman that won the year prior, Chris McCormick, and he had tried many times to win it, and he never did, and he was always close. And life lesson, how do you end up, becoming a champion? And he talked a little bit about that. And there was a kids race a day or two prior, and all 3 of my kids did it, so they all can say they crossed the Hawaiian Ironman finish line, which is kind of cool.
That's very cool.
We talked to Chris McCormick, Macca, they call him after, and my son's like, he goes, "Oh yeah, Macca." He goes, "I beat your daughter in the kids race," which apparently, he edged her out at the end. I'm like, don't be saying that, because her dad can whip your own dad. But anyway, I just registered, and he saw I had my number. He goes, "I'll sign your number, mate." And he's from Australia, and he signs it. I didn't really look at him. We get to the room, and Matthew, my son, goes, "Dad, why did Macca write 'you suck' on your number?" I'm like, "Oh God." He wrote, "I suck. I'm about to do the biggest race of my life." And I look at it, and it said, "Embrace the suck," which is a life lesson. Where his year prior, he got to mile 25. Him and this German competitor, they were both neck and neck, and who's going to win the Ironman? And mile 25, the other competitor pulled off, got a sip of water, and Macca, embraced the suck, and he ran, and he became a champion. And that's a lot of life lessons. When things are going bad, you don't feel well, you have 2 choices. You can kind of take the easy way, or and that's something I told my kids and anyone that I mentor. I kind of like that mantra of embracing the suck to become a better person, and avoiding things that may not bring you to greater heights. So
I can't tell if sports are a great metaphor for life or vice versa. It's one or the other.
yeah, there's definitely, and there's tons of examples that we could go on for a while about that. But.
Absolutely, Joe.
But exactly.
I'm sorry.
Exactly to that point, right? That like this is also where, in terms of potential students that would do so well in this profession, athletes, they have grit, they have determination, they have that psychology of peak performance. They resonate with so much of what we do. And what I really like about your embrace the suck kind of mentality is one of the things that I wish I would have known when I've had moments in my life that were down in the suck pile for sure, is it's not always going to be like this, right? Like it's not always going to feel as awful as it feels right now. And so embracing what it is and just continuing to slog through it, because the alternative, it feels like the easy way out. Like, I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to back up. But then the long-term repercussion of that is so much more devastating. Regret is an awful thing to live with, versus there was this period of my life that was kind of yucky. We'll use that word. And you know what? I got out of it. And another time in life that's going to probably come back, because these things are cyclical. So I really appreciate that. And I think that's beautiful that he wrote that as his signature to you.
And so there's just one follow up on that. You know, they have there's a tent where you can make signs to cheer on the competitors for the family. And so, of course, what does my son write on a big poster board? Embrace the suck. And I was like mile 10, you go down on Ali Drive, and as you're coming back Ali, you're about to go up Palani, which is kind of the little steep burner hill when you're not feeling well at all. And I saw him and my family on the side, and he's holding this "Embrace the suck" sign, and I think a lot of the other people that didn't know what that meant are looking at this little 10-year-old kid. What's this kid doing? And so anyway, I still have that sign that he made is in my garage, and it's still up there. And I look at it frequently when things are not going so well.
Yeah.
I love it. Two other races that I'd love for you to comment on. The Navy SEAL Frogman swim across Tampa Bay, 4-mile open water swim. Wow. Oh, how do you train for that?
Oh boy. So that's up, you know, I have a list of things I've done, and that's probably in the top 3 or 4 hardest, including the Hawaiian Ironman. But so one of the greatest events I've done for a number of reasons. One, because it brings awareness to the Navy SEALs. It raises money. You have to raise a certain amount of money to do it. It's competitive to get into. And it basically is a swim across Tampa Bay from St. Petersburg, from St. Petersburg to Tampa. And of course, they make it in the hardest month of the year. It's in January, second week in January. You know, it's so challenging. They actually require that you have a kayaker for each swimmer. So you have to have a kayaker that's with you in case, you know, something goes wrong. And you know, I asked my son, I said, Matthew, you interested in kayaking across the bay? And my wife's like, you can't make him do that. You know, he's going to go 4 miles in the cold water. And I'm like, well, how about the swimmer, me? She was more worried about him. But anyway, so he was my kayaker. And, you know, the beginning, the paratroopers come down and they assign you to a fallen SEAL. There's a number of active and former SEALs that do this every year. And as luck would have it, this was the hardest condition year. The base of the whole bay was going out to sea. The currents were terrible. SEALs know where the currents are going to be, and they send us maps on where to go and, you know, how to be where at certain times. Otherwise, you're going to get swept out. And there was a headwind, and it was 57-degree water, and it was, you know, like all the things that could be most challenging were most challenging. And you know, about halfway through, you know, I'm a left side breather, and Matthew's on my left, and he was telling me about a Navy SEAL, and I didn't really realize what he was talking about. But as hard as that is, the SEALs themselves that do the event are carrying their munitions in their packs behind them. So, and I was about to veer into, like, 3 of them were together, and you know, he's kind of steered me away from them. But I'm like, oh great, I'm going to be out here and drown a SEAL by pulling on him or something. But anyways, we swam in honor of a fallen SEAL that went to they tell you the day before, but a gentleman that went to my son's high school and also played football at my son's high school. And I knew his dad, so it was really a small world. And anyway, we had a Lakeland High School, we had a Lakeland flag that both he and I signed in his honor, and you know, we put it on the kayak, and that flag came across. And at the end, I ran, you know, I grabbed the flag and I ran up out of the water to the finish line, and sure enough, the fallen SEAL, his parents volunteer every year, and his parents were at the finish line. And I still remember, my face was red, and I was, you know, about spent, but I saw his dad, and his dad looked at the flag and goes, oh, look, there's a Lakeland flag. He recognized it. and he didn't realize that I was, and I saw him. I gave it to him, and I told him the whole thing, and it was really one of the more emotional times, if you can imagine. That and he still has, and he sent me a bunch of thank yous after. But really a cool event, and great to be a part of. My brother-in-law did it, and he actually got swept off course 3 times in the seals. There's some on jet skis. They had to pull him back on the course, and it was a challenge. So it was, I
Wow.
finished in a little over 2 hours, and he was almost 4 hours in the water. So it's hard, but a cool event, and I would recommend, if anyone has any open water endeavors, that's the one I'd recommend.
Joe, can I ask one more endurance question? So
Yeah.
you're a glutton for punishment a little bit, Matt. You're going back to Colorado this summer to do the 100-mile mountain bike race. I once heard a description of that race as biking 100 miles on huge hills with a sock in your mouth would be the equivalent if you were at sea level. True?
So that's a pretty good description. So I live and train at about 110 feet elevation, and this race is that's in the highest incorporated town in North America, Leadville, Colorado, which sounds like you've had some experience there. Old mining town, and it's a very iconic. It started as a 100-mile run, and they added a mountain bike in 1993. And it's actually 105 miles. That kind of gets you. You get to 100 miles, you think you're done. You got 5 more miles to go, but it's 105-mile. Starts at 10,000 feet. It goes to almost 13,000 feet elevation on a mountain bike. Parts of it are so steep you're off your bike pushing up, coming downhill, and just the oxygen at almost 13,000 feet is, you lose power. And I think they say from sea level to that altitude, you lose at least 20% of your power at that altitude. And your head, you get a little bit loopy. And the year I did it, actually, unfortunately, about 90 miles, a gentleman was ahead of me, and he didn't navigate the final switchback. He actually went over, and I had stopped to try to help, and the paramedics were there, the sheriff was there, and he actually passed away. He hit a tree, and he actually died during the race. It was a very sad thing. His wife and daughter were at the finish line, but you have to respect the elevation, and it's something that it's a challenge, and it's out there, and sometimes you never know how your body's going to respond and how you're going to respond. And I think that's one of the challenge, and one of the reasons I've kind of picked some of these things I've picked over the years. And once you finish it, and you don't always finish it, and if you don't, so be it. But if you don't start, and if you don't get to the starting line, you're never going to know. So that's another life lesson on take opportunities when you can, and don't be afraid to fail, because failures are going to happen at some point.
Oh my gosh, this is so good. Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'd love to pick up on that last statement that you just had, the not being afraid to fail, because I think all of us, especially in those that are kind of inclined toward health professions, we'll just say in general, you build on this idea of perfectionism, and there is no opportunity for failure in perfectionism. How have you managed that in your own life? And you could use any part of your life to kind of tuck on how you navigate through dealing with failure.
So failure, I think, is a necessary thing if you're going to excel. And you can read, and I read plenty of books on leaders and biographies, and there's not a person that's been successful that hasn't failed. We have a saying, and we say it all the time: a setback is a setup for better things to come, which is another little mantra that we like to say. But failure is a part of becoming more successful, and I think how you deal with that failure is a good indicator on your future endeavors. This embrace the suck kind of goes along with that same thing. And I've had some struggles in races where you're just not feeling well, or even in life, when life happens and things that don't go as you plan on. How do you deal with that? And I think keeping that in mind when when things come up that you hadn't expected. So I, about a year ago, I've been in practice 29 years, all with the same two older partners retired, and my partner of 29 years that recruited me to come here. Last year about this time came in the office, wasn't feeling so well, and ended up having a severe medical issue that he passed away a couple of months ago. And so here I am, we're two of us in the office, and I've got all his patients to deal with, and the most challenging year in my 29 years of practice. And you know what, I said, how am I going to deal with this? I've got, here's where I am. What do I need to do to get through this? And my staff is great. We have protocols in place, and it was definitely challenging for a while, and we're finally getting to the point where the dust has settled. But your outlook on how you deal with things like that, and that carries over from just, I think, your perspective on challenges when they arise, because everyone's going to have a challenge in your life, no matter what you do, or whether it's a sport or your home life or your business life or practice life. So I would just say, when a problem comes along, look at the different options on how you can deal with that problem, and what's the best way to get through that. So
Great advice. Yeah.
Yeah, that is wonderful advice, man. Matt, we could talk for hours here, I think. But one of the traditions we're starting to do is we ask some, kind of quick hit questions at the end of our interviews, just to kind of give our listeners a feel for you outside of either podiatry or ultra distance, or writing books or giving lectures. So, Joe, I'll start with the first one. So Matt, if you want to get away outside of going to an event where you're doing an athletic event, what would be your ideal 1 week vacation, non-athletic?
Boy, and I've had the fortune to travel all over the world. If it's in the U.S., being from Chicago, my wife from Chicago, it's probably near the top of the list. I still love Chicago, and it's other than the cold winters, there's so many festivals and events, sports town, every ethnicity, food you could imagine. We actually, things are settling down, and my wife and I and some friends of ours are going to be going to Chicago this summer for a little time off. Outside the U.S., I would probably have to say there's a beautiful little lake in northern Italy called Lake Como, if you may or may not have heard of it. But we've had the fortune to be there a few times, and just an iconic in the just almost in the northern Italian Alps, Switzerland, just on the other side. It's kind of an old glacier lake, and awesome cycling. I'd probably sneak in a bike ride around Lake Como, but that's probably the next stop.
Excellent.
All right, so I'm going to go with, you had mentioned that you like to read biographies. So if you had to kind of rank your top 3 books that really impacted your life, what would they be? And you could be just top 1 if you want to just go 1, but sometimes it's hard to pick just 1. So we'll go top 3.
Oh gosh. I got a whole bunch of them. I'm actually, it's not actually biography, but one of my books I'm reading now is I think where we are in the country. And it was sent to me by our mayor, the mayor of our town here. We've got to be friends through some leadership things. It's called The Comfort Crisis, and it basically talks about how our society is such that everything is geared toward comfort. You go to the airport, you're not carrying your bag, you're pulling it on rollers. You hop on the moving walkaway, so you don't have to walk. All these conveniences basically are making and you're looking at your phone, and instead of going and waiting in line at the Starbucks, you sit on your phone at the desk, and you push the app, and you don't even wait in line anymore. So, but that's a current book I'm reading, and that's something that I would say I'd recommend something like that, because that's hit home. But boy, there's so many other books I'm not even sure where to start with that.
Totally fair. It's hard sometimes to come to break it down, but since we're in rapid fire, I'm going to pass the ball back to Jeff, because otherwise I'll jump on the stoicism thing and we can have a whole nother podcast just on that.
Yeah.
So,
the book, Mac wrote this book, and he has an entire chapter. Just as long as we were talking about that, this came to mind because he has an entire chapter that's called "Embrace the Suck," and he kind of goes through that as well. So, like a podcast, a book is podcast, not a podcast, but everyone's life story and how they got to be where they are and what challenges they met, and I just enjoy reading. Although I've been listening to podcasts more often just because it's more timely, and when I'm I go out for a 4-hour bike ride, I can listen to a podcast. And ironically, so I went to the ACFIS, and I flew into this is kind of how I function sometimes. I flew in, I look where I'm going, and I try to find a nice bike ride around. I came last year and actually talked to some of your students of the Sports Medicine Club, and this has been on my bucket list for a while. It's the single most ridden, apparently the mountain that's ridden the most on a bike in the United States, just south of you in Tucson, called Mount Lemmon, which you probably familiar with. I'm like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to be close enough. So I flew in and brought my shoes and pedals and had a lined a bike up, and I ended up rode up Mount Lemmon, which is it's the reason why it's the most common, because you start at 2,000 feet in Tucson, and then you go through the saguaro cactus fields, and then you go through the Hoodoo Formation, and then you end up at the top. There's a ski resort up there, and you're from 2,000 to 9,000 feet elevation, so it's a 7,000 foot climb through 5 different microclimates. And at the top, University of Arizona has their telescopes up there, and just a super kind of a really cool way to do it. And I try to add on little things like this. And I told Maddie last year I did this. Actually, asked your students about a hike around Phoenix, and they said, "Yeah, Camelback's a good close one." And they're telling me which way to go, and I didn't know which way. And they said they're both hard, but I said, "All right, well, I got a flight later. I'm gonna try to pick one or the other." And one of the students said, "Well, you know what? You want to do them both? You can break the camel's back," which I didn't know what the heck that meant. And I go, "Oh, I'm up for it." You basically go up the Echo, cross down the Chola, and you come back up, and you basically do the whole thing over and back. And I did that. And I told Maddie about it, and she's like, "Well, we're going to be there. Let's try it." I'm like, "Oh, well, if you know what you're getting into." And sure enough, the Sunday of ACFAS, before it flew back, the two of us went up and we broke the camel's back, and it was one of the cooler.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! What a great way to end a phenomenal meeting.
Yeah. So it's super cool stuff.
Any last thoughts, Joe?
We gotta ask one of our classic ones. All right, you're going out to dinner. What kind of food are you picking?
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, pasta Italian is good, but seafood is good. In recent, so we did, and I know I think Jeff at least went. We did this bike race in Iceland over the summer. It was 128 miles, 200K race, off-road. It went around Mount Hekla, the most active volcano in Iceland, and we ate some of the best food I've ever had, including they had a reindeer appetizer, a reindeer like a prosciutto, which was, never thought I'd eat reindeer, but I had reindeer. But the cod and the fish, the salmon, cod, every night we had phenomenal seafood. So that's probably going to be probably on the top of my list.
Awesome.
That is fabulous. Oh, so what was your favorite pre-race meal? Carbo loading, was that?
Yeah, I think traditional pasta, and I like, and I don't make a whole lot, but I make a cacio e pepe, which is basically pasta and cheese, and it's a simple ingredients: peppers, pasta, and cheese, and that's probably one of my favorite things to eat, and it's still carbo loading. So
that's great. Well, Matt, we are so thankful that you could carve out some time to join us on Dean's Chat. And Joe and I are going to send you a Dean's Chat mug to kind of get the caffeine going. And thank you for all you do for our profession. Just what a career, incredible. You give back, you achieve great things, and I can't wait for your new book to come out.
Yeah, well, you guys are awesome, and like I said, you guys are spreading the gospel of how great our profession is. And anyone that listens to this, you have 200 plus lectures. So one more little side here. So I was climbing up Mount Lemmon, and I knew I was going to be on this, and I hadn't really listened, or even I didn't really know about it before Maddie. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to plug in some of your episodes. So my 4 or 5 hours it took me to go up Mount Lemmon, I had your podcast listening to, because I think I know at least half of your guests that have been on, and it's just neat to hear the backstories on people that I see at meetings and talk to all the time. So keep up.
I love the backstories too, because everybody kind of
Yeah.
knows the vibe, and they know who you are, and they know you were an editor of the book and all, but getting into the nitty gritty and embracing the suck and those kind of things you don't get at a lecture.
No, exactly, and it's really so I really enjoyed listening. So now I'm a follower, and I'm hooked on listening to your guests, because it's entertaining, but it serves a purpose as well. So you guys keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Matt. Well, to all of our listeners out there, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating, or even better yet, leave a comment or two. And if you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. And until next week, everybody, cheers.
Cheers.